So, hi, my name is Christopher St. John. I'm a graduate student here at Ohio University, filling in for our Holly for this artist talk for the OH+5 exhibition. Today, we are speaking with Shalya Marsh and Gabi Cooper, two featured artists in OH+5 contemporary art of our region. The exhibition is on view now through March 13th at the Dairy Barn Art Center, and you can find more information at dairybarn.org. Thanks for joining us today, Shalya. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Shalya Marsh. I'm a service assistant professor at West Virginia University and a ceramic-based artist, but I also work in other media and kind of non-traditionally in digital formats as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Gabi, please introduce yourself.
I am Gabi Cooper, and I teach high school art here in Wetzel County, West Virginia. I teach at Valley High School. It's in Pine Grove. And I am just now kind of getting back into creating time to make art of my own. So this is a really exciting thing to be able to talk about it and everything. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so I will turn the conversation over to the two of you and enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see, which one do I want to start with? So I think the big thing here, I looked at some of your work on your Instagram and everything. It's so interesting, but I want to know more about like the processes that you used. I saw that you use a ceramic 3D printer, and I don't really know anything about this, so I want to hear all about that.
Well, the works in the exhibition OH+5 don't utilize a ceramic 3D printer, but they do utilize digital technology in other ways. So a lot of my work focuses on knot and tangle forms, and those I make out of ceramic. So I'm using coils of clay in order to make these knot and tangles that I permanently fix using the kiln. So once a clay object is fired, you know, it can't be unknotted, as they would say, and I really take advantage of that. In the exhibition, the knots that I've created are hung up on ceramic posts, and what I do is I set up lighting in order to trace shadows of those forms. And in the exhibition there at the Dairy Barn, the shadows are multiple shadows. So I'm using those multiple shadows that I'm tracing. I'm scanning those into the computer and then digitally cutting them on a vinyl cutter. And so I layer the multiple shadows up, and it kind of reflects a passage of time to me, the way in which the multiple shadows are behind the forms on the wall. But in my studio practice currently, I'm doing a lot of work with a ceramic 3D printer. So similar to any other kind of 3D printer, a ceramic 3D printer is using an XYZ axis in order to extrude a very small coil of clay, kind of wet, soppy clay.
Like a slip.
Yeah, it's not quite that. It's not quite that wet, because otherwise everything would kind of fall down. Yeah. Yeah, really, it's really soft so that you can squeeze it out. Basically, it's kind of like a hot glue gun, but with clay in it instead of glue, and no heat involved. And it just prints layer by layer. So in the studio now, I'm taking those shadow forms and working in a CAD program to make them dimensional so that they have height. And then I'm printing those shadows with height and then recessing the knot forms behind the shadows. So it kind of confuses space a little bit with those pieces. It's great to be working at a university where I have access to a lot of digital tools. I run the digital fabrication lab here, and so that gives me a lot of toys to play with. And I like to take advantage of all the different technology that is out there when it seems applicable to the work.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I like what you said about passage of time. It's such like a simple way to show that, just with shadows, you know, with an object. I really like that.
Yeah, I kind of think about, you know, the sun's movement in that. So I was, it's great to hear that you are also from or living in West Virginia. You know, we're both in the Ohio Plus category here. I really enjoyed looking at your work, and I'm kind of curious as to how you made your pieces and what went into your thought process when creating your composition, because your composition to me is kind of non-standard in a really wonderful way, breaks the plane of the edge in a really great way that kind of moves your eye around.
You. Yeah, it's cool that you mentioned that we're both from West Virginia. I went to Fairmont State, so I was at WVU a lot for different things. So it's super cool. Whenever I saw you're from Morgantown, I was like, oh, cool. So I, since college, graduated from Fairmont State, I think, oh man, 5-6 years ago now. I kind of been really focusing on nostalgia. And at the time, while I was in college, I was really, focusing on family and things like that, being away from them and small town and all those kind of things that represent a sense of home and place. So now I'm kind of focusing more on like items that represent nostalgia and like the place you're from. So where I live in Payton City, West Virginia, there's a stained glass factory, and there was once like a Payton City pottery factory. So just different kind of industrial things. So for the piece in this show, I was thinking about mostly like pattern and things that represent nostalgia. And I think we've all seen that golden butterfly Corel pattern. I think, a lot of people have seen that at their grandma's house and things like that. So that was kind of the first note that I made, or the first move that I made, was I wanted to put that pattern into a piece. So I started with that, and then I kind of thought, what kind of food do I want to put on the plate, or what do I want to put on the plate that also will kind of link into this like nostalgia and sense of place and Appalachia and things like that. So I did a green tomato. A lot of people think it's a pepper, but it's a green tomato because we ate fried green tomatoes a lot. And then, I tend to do a lot of collaging in my pieces. I really like to collage. It's just something that, I don't know, I enjoy. So yeah.
Is it's hard to tell because I haven't seen the show in person. But from the images, it looks like in the bottom right hand corner, there's maybe a recipe card.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
So that's one of my grandma's recipes. So yeah.
And does all of that kind of have to do with the title of the piece?
Yes. So I moved into my grandparents' house recently. And I was, at that time when I moved into their home, I was thinking a lot about how the kitchen was kind of serving as like a sacred space for years. So my grandma was a homemaker, and she spent, I think most of her daily life was spent in that kitchen, prepping and things like that. So even though I now own the house, it still feels like I'm kind of a guest there. And so I was just kind of thinking about that and being in that space and living in this house now and just kind of creating art, again, about nostalgia and things like that. So yeah, my grandma's name was Nancy, and that's where the title comes from.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. What about the significance of your title, or how do you title your pieces whenever, they kind of represent this passage of time? How does that work for you?
So I work in series, and these pieces came from the Vestigial Remnant series. So the idea of vestiges and remnants being things that are kind of left over. And so I kind of consider those shadows as being these remnants that are left over, and they're moments that I can capture in the vinyl, but they're very impermanent. So the thing about the vinyl on the wall is that every time you install a piece, you need to make a new piece of vinyl, because that vinyl is temporary. It's really just kind of exhibition vinyl. And so it gets ripped off after. So these are kind of the remnants that are kind of left behind in my view. And the vinyl, it has this great quality of people can't quite place it, can't quite place that material, because it kind of sinks into the wall. You feel a little bit like it's painted on the surface of the wall, and that gives it kind of a nice quality that relates to that series title.
So your pieces are truly like installation pieces.
Yeah, oftentimes,
cool.
Oftentimes I make, so in the series, I'll hang up, a large group of pieces together. Yeah. So do you work in series at all?
So I always start a piece with like this great big grand plan of like it being a series. And then the piece takes me longer than I expect, of course. And then by the time I'm done with that piece, it's like I have a whole new idea for a whole other series. So I never, at least not at this point in my, art making, am I ever like sticking with that series. Sometimes I'll come back to it, but a lot of the times before I've finished a piece, I have a new idea for a whole other series. So right now it's kind of just a jumble of pieces that all, like you can tell they were all made by me, but they don't necessarily all have the exact same, I guess, theme. So yeah.
What are you working on in your studio right now?
So right now I'm focusing on, I want to do a series of pieces represent different zodiacs, but like Appalachian versions. So right now I'm doing Sagittarius, and I'm doing like Appalachian hunters and things like that to kind of represent that. And I have lots of plans for all the other pieces, but like I said, we'll see how those go. I usually get like a whole new idea, like I said, before I get done with the piece. So what are you currently working on?
I'm working on those 3D printed pieces in the studio right now. Whenever you're working with new technologies, it takes a lot of time to kind of have some trial and error. And so there's a lot of error right now in the work, but that's all part of the process. And I don't think if it all went completely to plan, I would like it quite as much. So I plan things out a lot, and I absolutely work in series, but I always allow room for intuition to take over and for the pieces to kind of dictate what they need from me. And right now they just need me to use the printer a lot in order to solve the technical problems of creating larger pieces on the printer. The printer that I'm using is a PotterBot, and I've used several other clay printers in the past. The PotterBot has some advantages and some disadvantages, like all kinds of equipment, right? But it is generally people print pots on it, so they're not that wide at the base. Sometimes they get bigger as they're going up, but they tend to be a kind of modest scale. And the pieces that I'm making are low and flat. So they create interesting challenges because clay is a material that likes to shrink and move. And so that is always a struggle to kind of control the way in which the clay is shrinking and moving.
Mm-hmm. I saw a piece on your Instagram again. It was like honeycombs or something, like the shape was similar. It was so cool. Was that a 3D printed?
Yeah, so the honeycombs that you saw, that is the support structure on the inside of the print. So eventually the honeycomb pattern will get covered over, but that will be what is on the back side of the piece. It's kind of a beautiful surprise. For
that's what I was thinking. I would want to show that off. That is so like, yeah.
What are some of the other things that you find inspiration from?
Like I mentioned before, I think, industries, local industries especially, they're just, I don't know, they're kind of fascinating to me that such beautiful things could have came from such a tiny little town. I think that's really, sorry, that's another bell. I'm at school. So yeah, local industry, industries that are no longer in the town, family photos, different patterns and imagery within that maybe we don't remember, but when we see that again, it brings like back this whole sense of, childhood or nostalgia or whatever. Just things like that. Yeah.
So I think we're to the quick fire section of the presentation here. I see that Christopher is shooting us some questions in the chat. I think the first one is that clay or paint. And, I like clay, obviously.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a paint person. It's like a yearly kind of ongoing joke with my students because they all want to do clay so bad, but they know that I'm not super comfortable with the medium. So it's always like, okay, we'll do it. Let's do it. Let's try it. But yeah, I'm definitely more of a paint person.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think that I tend to use a lot of different materials. So like not paint per se. I'm not a big user of paint, but I'll do a lot of collage on the side. So you talked about collage. I really kind of relate to that in that I love to like collect things and put them together in different compositions. And I think it inspires my clay work in a different way than other things. But I think there's a lot of room for different things. So morning studio time or morning hike?
That's a tough one. I guess probably morning studio. Yeah.
I'm definitely a morning studio kind of person. I get up early, and those hours in the morning when it's quiet and no one else is around, they are very productive for me.
Yes.
So do you like traditional or analog, or traditional or digital kind of tools?
Traditional. Yeah.
You know, I tend towards the digital, but I think it's because I have access to so many tools.
Right. Your career is like perfect for digital, and it gives you access, like you said, to so many different things. I hadn't even heard of a ceramic printer until I got on your Instagram. I was like, whoa. So it's just crazy the different things you're able to do.
It is a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Trying to see. Sun or moon? It's kind of a random one.
I don't know. I like both.
I've been really interested in the moon phases lately and just the way that it affects everything. So I'm gonna say moon right now.
I must say I have been really noticing the full moons lately. I don't know what it is about that, but I can kind of feel it around me, the energy from that. So
super cool.
And I don't know about you, but I'm a NPR all the time kind of girl.
Yeah. Yeah, I do music and podcasts, but I like podcasts a lot.
Yeah. So, and I'm not a pet person. How about you?
I have a cat, but I'm not a dog person. I hate, but I'm not.
I will say that if I was not allergic to cats, I would love to have a cat, because I just love that. I love their personalities. They have very independent personalities, but they can also just like come up and love on you, which is really, really great.
Yes. So museum or gallery?
Both. Why would you limit yourself?
That's what I was thinking. That's what I kind of noted on one of my sheets. I was like, oh man, both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of these questions both could apply for sure.
Yeah, I took my students to the art museum in Morgantown.
Yeah.
This past fall. It was great. It was wonderful.
What show did they see?
Rauschenberg.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great show.
They had really great activities for the students that linked in with, it was wonderful. It was great.
There are tons of resources over there. I think they really do a good job with their education programming.
Yeah. All the quick fire. This was so fun.
Well, they were quick. I was like, wait, but quick. We shouldn't get too deep into these things.
Yes, I whenever I was in college, listened to, it was called The Jealous Curator. She was like, it's great. And so when I saw quickfire, I was like, oh my gosh, I've made it big. I'm like on The Jealous Curator right now.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. There's a lot of podcasts out there that are really wonderful. I tend to like have trouble deciding. So I always stick
a little overwhelmed.
Yeah. I stick to NPR because it's just, they change it up for me, and then I don't have to really decide. But, you know, and I get recommendations from people. I'll get kind of stuck on a podcast for a while. And when the weather is nice, I like to go out and walk and listen to the podcast. But I don't do that in my studio, because then there's deciding that has to happen and things I have to change. And I never want to change anything. I just want to be kind of focused on what I'm doing in the studio.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am with music. I'll like stick with an artist for a piece, and then when I get done with that piece, it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna try something new. But I don't change up, like who I'm listening to while I'm working on that piece. It's funny that you say that.
So how do you handle balancing your life as a teacher and your studio life?
Oh boy, that's a hard one. I'm just now kind of learning to do that. Since I graduated college, it's really just been focusing on, creating lesson plans and creating, things for my students and opportunities. And now it's like I kind of am stepping back a little bit and focusing on, making art for myself, because I think that's an important part for my career, but it's hard. It's very tricky.
It is hard. It's something I talk to my students a lot about. And one of the things that I found that works for me is to schedule time for the studio, because if I don't schedule it, then I'll get distracted by, vacuuming. Doing something else that is unrelated to my studio. And so if I schedule it and I say that from this time to this time, I'm going to be in the studio making artwork, it works really well for me. And sometimes I go and I tell them, sometimes they're like, well, but I'm not feeling creative then. And I just say, well, the point is to have a routine about it. You don't always have to be making something. So sometimes I'll go into the studio and I'm not feeling very creative. And instead of actually making artwork, I'll organize or plan for something else that is art related. And it keeps me focused on being there and creating.
Yeah, I think for me too, a lot of it is making art that I'm excited about. It's like, reading a book. Like, you don't want to keep reading a book that you're not into. And for me, I think right out of college, I was making art that I thought I should be making, or making art like in a series to go into a show. And now I just kind of make art that I want to make. I think that excitement keeps me going back and making time for it.
So the piece in the exhibition, Nancy's Kitchen, is so that I know there's some paint in there, right? There's some watercolors in there, or is it gouache?
The plate and the tomato is colored pencil.
Oh,
and then the background is just acrylic paint, and then some collaging. I use all kinds of stuff, but I don't think I did watercolor in that one. Ooh, I use all kinds of stuff.
It's probably the acrylic paint that I'm seeing.
Yeah, so the background, the orange is acrylic paint, but the actual like tomato and the plate, that's colored pencil. Yeah. Yes, that's what I thought. I was talking to my students. I was like, this lady uses a ceramic 3D printer, and I used Crayola color pencils.
Oh, no,
like, I'm not fancy enough for this conversation.
No, I think you use the materials that you feel comfortable with and that work for your process, right? Like, I mean, there are times when I'm using colored pencils, trust me, it's just different things.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah. I mean, I use some very, very basic materials. Clay is one of the most basic materials that there is too, right? It's just, we dig it out of the ground. So it's really pretty elemental.
Yeah, and I think for me, because I do teach, all different classes here with the high school students, we use all different materials. So me seeing them use all different ones, weekly is like, I want to try them too. And I want to put them all in one piece. So yeah.
At one point in my life, I taught middle school art. Well, middle school and high school, both. And I felt the same way because I was teaching so many different materials, and there were what I had access to. And so I did a lot more drawing and a lot more collage at that point in my life. I've always done clay, always figured out a way in which I could have access to a studio that allowed me to do that. But at the same time, I find that if I only do that, then I get kind of stale. And so changing it up in terms of my materials helps me to go back to the clay with fresh perspective. It's not work that I typically exhibit. It's work that I do for myself that I send to my friends, a lot of mail art. So postcards that are collaged and sent in the mail. And it's just kind of fun, and you can share it with someone else.
What are you hoping when people see the work and the show, or even your new 3D printed work? What are you hoping that like your work, makes people think of or provokes or whatever?
You know what? I used to worry about what people thought, and I don't anymore. So I feel like
a very good way to be.
Yeah, I feel like everybody is going to come to the work with a different perspective, and each person is going to respond differently to that work. I make the work with certain ideas in mind, and some people will really relate to those ideas when they see the work and will connect with them and get that. And for other people, different things will come up, and that's just the nature of how we experience the world, and our cultural experiences. Personally, they make us have a different perspective to the things that we're seeing. So I don't worry about it too much.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. A very good way to be. I know that my first thoughts when looking at it was it's all so clean. It's so like refreshing to view. My stuff's kind of busy, and I don't know, maybe that represents me, kind of busy and clustered, but your work is just so refined. And so, yeah, I love it.
Well, Gabi, for a number of years, I've been really trying to put color back into the work. Years ago, I worked with more color in the work. Right, all of my colors right now are like white and shades of gray. And I've been trying, and I have like, I don't know, 40 different small batches of colored clay mixed up in my studio. And I just can't seem to integrate it in a way that feels honest and true. I feel like I go for it, and I make a series of work, and it's just not quite where I want it to be. So for right now, the work just screams at me that it needs to be devoid of that color. I wonder what will change in my life or in my experience that will allow that color to kind of come back in, because I enjoy it a lot, especially seeing it in other people's work. But right now, my work says no.
I like it. I like the cleanness, and it's just so refined and very elegant.
Thank you.
So you said that you hadn't seen the exhibit. I have not either, but I watched the video of like the tour and everything. Did any of the pieces stand out to you, or were you like going back to look at that piece again or anything like that?
You know, what really stood out to me was that there are some really incredible and talented artists in this region. It was wonderful to see, and I wish I could see it in person, because I think there's just so many great pieces of artwork in the show. And the walkthrough made me just want to be able to see them in person and see, you know, the materials and the texture and the dimensionality of so many of the pieces in there.
Yes.
How about you? What did you think of it?
Yeah, there's just such a variety of work, you know. I mean, just all different, just different things. I know I saw Robert Villamagna had work, and he's kind of a local, and his work's incredible. But just to go from that to something, you know, more refined like you, it's just such a variety, and I love that. It's just so incredible to think about, you know, all these individuals in this area creating work, you know, in their own way, in their own space. It's just really a good thought, I think.
I think it was that the jurors did a really good job with selection, and it just everything looked so strong.
And that space is it's a really good space.
It is. And you know, Holly does an amazing job. Everybody there at the Dairy Barn does an amazing job putting those exhibitions together. I've had the opportunity to see several exhibitions there actually in person, and they're always just displayed beautifully.
Yeah, I love the quilt shows that they do. It's just, you leave there just feeling super inspired and wanting to make. And I'm not a quilter, but it's just incredible.
I'm not a quilter either, but seeing that show makes me want to go home and make quilts.
Yes.
And also, you know, it's really great to see the variety in terms of the kinds of quilts that are even included, you know, from very, very traditional quilts to much more art pieces that are using non-traditional materials and becoming more dimensional, and that you would not put on a bed, but are still using that format of the quilt.
Yeah, I went to the Huntington Museum of Art recently, and they had some really cool different textile pieces, and just people are using materials in ways that I've never seen, and it's really exciting stuff.
I haven't been down there in a while. What is there a thematic show up right now?
There was some, I'm trying to think of what that artist's name was. There was a big show. I can't remember the artist's name. I hate that, but and then they had some different things. They had the tree up, a Christmas tree, and it had all these different paint palettes on it that different artists locally had done. It was very cool. I can't remember exactly, but that's a great museum. I'd never been there before.
Yeah, it is. It's really a great space. There's you know, a lot of, I think, pretty great spaces here in West Virginia. I don't think people really kind of think about that, but they're here and there.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Maybe our last question, but about your painting. Would you call it a painting or mixed media piece?
Media, yeah, it's got all kinds.
Yeah. So the tomato you talked a little bit about that, the tomato and tomatoes in West Virginia. Can you elaborate on that and talk about its significance just a little?
I knew that I wanted to do, I didn't know right off the bat that I wanted to do a tomato. I knew I wanted to do something green because, like I said, I was kind of focusing on industry and different, things that were manufactured in the state. And so I thought by adding something green on the plate, it would kind of bring more like, that contrast of man-made versus like a natural element, whatever that food was going to be. And I know, there's just so many different varieties. And I think, wasn't there like a tomato that was brought here from somewhere or something?
Well,
I don't know that whole history, but I know like little pieces of it.
There's the mortgage lifter tomato, which was created here in West Virginia, and called a mortgage lifter because the man who created the tomato was able to pay off his mortgage selling those tomatoes because they're so popular. I actually grew them in my garden last year.
That's very cool.
And we had some fried green tomatoes from that mortgage lifter tomato. So
very cool.
Yeah, I like to make them. I have eaten more fried green tomatoes since living in West Virginia than I'd ever eaten in my whole life.
Okay. Are you from West Virginia then, or no?
No, I'm originally from upstate New York. I moved here 6 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I work at a greenhouse in the spring in Ohio, and I mean, everyone comes in. The first thing everyone wants is the tomatoes. It's just like, and there's such a variety, and people are so specific about what they want and what they like.
They really are, and there are so
like
many
that.
different kinds. So many different kinds.
Yes.
So I just know a very little bit about it. I've only been gardening for a few years, but I know it's very, I find it very rewarding. So
yes, me too. I like it.
Yeah.
What else is on these?
Oh, I can jump in now.
Okay.
Like that's a natural a sort of pause for the conversation. I was really enjoying this conversation a lot. I appreciate you too, like connecting with your work. That was really great. I think it's so interesting when artists come together and they start sort of, touching their ideas together and sort of, seeing where they overlap and intersect and differ, and just that natural curiosity that artists have about the creative process between each other. That was just a really great conversation. Thank you both.
Well, thank you for having us. It's really nice to meet you both in this Zoom sphere.
Yeah, I was talking to my students. I was like, this is just crazy. We're just tucked in, a little tiny school in the hills of West Virginia, and I'm going to meet this new artist. And yeah, I was very excited for this.
Yeah. Well, so thank you both. Today we spoke with Shalya Marsh and Gabi Cooper, two featured artists and OH+5 contemporary art of our region at the Dairy Barn Art Center. The exhibition is on view now through March 13th at the Dairy Barn Art Center, and you can find out more information at dairybarn.org. So thank you both so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being part of the exhibit. This has been really great.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.